long in the process. We want to empower the individual to also select the doctor.
It doesn't matter who they have as a doctor, though, Congressman. If their insurance company doesn't cover the rehabilitation,
that's why we take the limit away. But the other most important part is how you are treated. If you sit with Mark Ashley, it's very important who treats him. We had a tragic accident here with a local individual, Sam, wounded in Afghanistan with a brain injury. I talked to the parents, and you know the first person I called after that was Mark Ashley. To talk to him, because I want him to get the very best care. I want him to have the and they have told me, and Walter Reed, they're getting the very best care. Next week, hopefully, I'll be able to see him. But you want to make sure, true what you're talking about, that the insurance company doesn't break it, but also who treats them and how soon you're able to be treated.
And another part of the problem is these veterans live in rural areas. They don't have access. Let me pose the same question to you.
And if I may, part of the problem here is we're closing the barn door after the horse is out. The real problem is that we're, first of all, sending young men and women into combat without being properly prepared. We've never followed the Pell doctrine with respect to Iraq and Afghanistan, and I strongly disagree with my opponent's votes on those two wars. We should have made absolutely certain that we had a clear definition of the mission, a clear definition of victory, a clear exit strategy, support. We didn't do these things, and that's one of the main reasons why we're having these problems today. What's worse is that, as you might know, the Iraq and Afghanistan veterans have given my opponent a D rating on his votes. He has not lived up to his responsibility to take care of veterans when they come back. The suicide rate you were talking about, we've got 18 veterans every day committing suicide in this country. That's unconscionable, and the main reason is because they're not getting access to mental health care soon enough. Some of them have to wait as much as a year and a half or 2 years because the funding isn't there. I appreciate the fact that my opponent wants to cut the expenses in government. We all want to cut expenses in government, but we have to be smart about it. The people who have sacrificed, in some cases, everything, including their lives, and their families who've sacrificed so much, deserve better. And if I were in Congress, I would not be voting to cut, as my opponent has, the request that the VA made for housing, for new construction. He gave them 10% of what they asked for in his vote. I think these are bad votes, and I would vote differently.
Jim, I can't let those go.
Rebut if you wish.
I'll be gladly. Let's rebut with the facts. We increased the questions PTSD. We increased it by 35 million. That's not a subtraction.
In your bill, but it didn't pass because
it passed the House.
Passed the House. It passed the House. That's not a law.
Terry,
passing the House is not sufficient.
I'm not a senator, okay?
I understand, but
I
you're
have a responsibility in the House. Secondly, first time someone came and brought me something about our VA clinic, I didn't wait a day. I took action that day. And why there's an investigation today in there? Not with what the VA told us back, because I went directly to the committee and had the IG investigate.
You're talking about the personal information that was supposedly taken from the VA by a doctor.
Exactly. VA gave a report. I have not settled for that. The other thing, we have an audit on how the individuals are being treated down in Sepulveda. That is a bipartisan letter that created it with an investigation and an audit. So you can never attack me, because from my belief is there's nothing greater we can do is taking care of our veterans that defend our freedom. And I stand up for my patriotism each and every day.
If only he would work with the other party. But unfortunately, one party in one House cannot pass laws. And I would hope that after 6 years of serving in the United States House of Representatives, that my opponent would understand that you require real bipartisanship. And passing bills in one House, knowing in advance that they're never going to get through the other House and that they won't be signed by the President, means you're not succeeding, that you're failing as a leader, not just of your party, but of our country. We need better than that.
Okay, we're coming up on a break here. Let me just ask one more question on this vein, though.
Yes.
What's become of statesmanship in our Congress? Let me start with you, Congressman. I mean, really, there seems to be a dearth of compromising going on there, and everybody seems to be pretty polarized. What's happened to statesmanship?
It's a polarized place, but I don't sit back and take that. You know, when I was a freshman, you know the first thing I did? I created a bipartisan caucus of just our freshmen with a Democrat, Ed Perlmutter from Colorado. I bought the dinner, and I'd bring us to dinner, and you know what I'd do first of all? We wouldn't talk anything about politics. Why? Because I wanted us to get to know each other as people. Because we're going through the same walks of life away from our families and others, and we bonded. You know what else I created this year? A bipartisan caucus for California. And it wasn't that I went to some other group and joined it. I'm the founder.
Did you invite Harry Reid, though?
Harry Reid's in the Senate. You know who I did invite and started with? Karen Bass, the former Speaker of the House. in California. And you know where we had it? It wasn't in some other room. It was in my office. So I am building what I believe is a framework that can get us there. My responsibility is the Central Valley, and I'm going to fight for that. I'm going to fight because we can't continue to have $1 trillion part of deficit. I don't believe in the high-speed rail. I don't think Obamacare and government takeover is the right thing to do. Those are the values of where I've grown up my whole life. That's what I'm going to fight for. At the same time frame, I'm going to make sure it works. I'm not going to change my principles or my appearance just to run for office.
Shall we talk about statesmanship? On January 20th of 2009, while the President of the United States was being sworn in, my opponent met with a group of Republicans at a restaurant in Washington, D.C. I think it's called the Caucus Room. And at that meeting, this is documented in a book by Robert Draper called Do Not Ask What Good We Do, they all agreed that they would vote against every single bill proposed by the other party.
Where'd you...
in Robert Draper's book. And he's never denied it. I assume...
Let me answer it and I'll tell you the truth.
Well, okay, but that is what has happened to bipartisanship. It's an extension of what happened to our Congress in 1995, when members of Congress left because bipartisanship was brought to an end. And that's what we're seeing today, the end of bipartisanship in Congress.
See, how are we going to solve our problems if we take what he says, you take a half-truth and you spin it in a way to run for office? You know what that dinner was? It was a group of Republicans because Obama was being sworn in and they were having their dinners and we weren't invited to anything. So we got together. But you know what we said? And I'm quoted in the book, and you could talk to Draper. I said we have to offer ideas. I happened to be chosen as one of the young guns. Paul Ryan, Eric Cantor, and myself.
But he doesn't deny what he said. You don't deny that you said you would vote against every bill.
No, we never said that, and it doesn't say that in the book.
So he was lying. Absolutely, it says that in the book, sir. Absolutely, in black and white.
What I said is we're going to propose an idea for everything that they do. Because you know what? I get frustrated with my own party that just says no. I think I need to take my conservative principles and offer a solution. That's why we're the only people to pass a budget. That's why we're the only ones to be able to reframe government out of control spending. We're the third Congress since World War II that's cut discretionary spending year over year, even when Republicans controlled all and Democrats controlled all.
All right, gentlemen, we're going to take a break. We got a lot of ground to cover, about halfway there, and you are watching an in-depth candidates debate here on TV 17. We're back right after the break. Stay with us.
15 to 25% off select reclining furniture during Weatherby's excess inventory sale. Save on recliners, sofas, love seats, and sectionals. Choose from leather mats to full-body chaise comfort, including power with many styles to choose from. Quality names like Lane, Lazy Boy, Ashley, and more. Right now, pay no sales tax or pay no interest for up to 48 months. Plus, get free delivery during Weatherby's excess inventory sale. Now at Weatherby's, 7th and Chester in Bakersfield.
DC's RV Center is bursting with new inventory. You won't believe what our new lineup has to offer, like this slide-out bedroom and a beautiful interior that brings all the comforts of home with you. And check out the all-new Elevation by Crossroads. Now you can take your toys without giving up your comfort. Stop by DC's RV Center and step inside one of our new RVs, fifth wheels, travel trailers, or toy haulers today. DC's RV Center. We provide everything but your destination.
Working in the spirit of the Golden Empire, Alyssa Carlson, 17 News.
And welcome back to 17 News in-depth political coverage. Tonight we are talking with the two candidates for the 23rd Congressional District, Congressman Kevin McCarthy and challenger Terry Phillips.
All right, gentlemen, we have some other issues to discuss here. I think we should start perhaps with high-speed rail. I know where Congressman McCarthy stands on this issue. And let's start with you, Mr. Phillips. We haven't heard from you on high-speed rail. Are you for it or against it?
I agree with Congressman McCarthy and what he said 5 years ago. I think it's a great idea. I'm glad that he persuaded then Governor Schwarzenegger to get it on the ballot. I think it is a terrific technology. It could make California a centerpiece of transportation technology. The problem I have with it is that the proposals have been imperfect. The authority hasn't engaged the community very well. They're starting to do that now, and there have been a lot of meetings, especially right here in Bakersfield, to try to find the right route. and the right mix of employment. We've got a lot of union and non-union employees who want to work on this project. About a third of the money will go to help small businesses. I know my opponent is in favor of that. So there's a lot of good things coming with this high-speed rail. It's been funded in part by the federal government, in part by the state government. Now, he likes to say that you would not buy a house if all the money that you had was to pour the foundation, and he says it hasn't been fully funded. Well, that's kind of a funny thing to say, because I don't know how he bought his house, but most of us, when we buy a house, don't have cash to buy the whole thing in advance. Most businesses don't work that way. We pay for things as we go along. High-speed rail has a lot of pluses. It has some challenges too, but the fact is that this is something that will help us tremendously, and not just here in the Central Valley. It'll help the whole state. And lastly, I want to say that I strenuously object to the term train to nowhere. This is not nowhere. I live here. This is an important part of the route, and I look forward to riding the high-speed rail when it's completed.
And Mr. Phillips, what about the rising cost of the high-speed rail? And people say with the economy right now, it's just a bad time. Let's hold off. Let's wait.
I'm sure they said that during the Great Depression when we built the Golden Gate Bridge and Hoover Dam and the Grand Coulee Dam. I'm sure in the midst of the Civil War, when Abraham Lincoln authorized the construction of the Transcontinental Railroad, people were saying, how can we afford this? The country's divided. We don't have the money. You know, we Americans don't believe in impossibility. I've traveled around the world, I've worked around the world. The thing that people most admire about us is we don't accept the notion of impossibility. We landed on the moon because everybody else said it was impossible. We didn't accept that. And I know we can do this with high-speed rail too. We've got to do it right. But simply saying no, just because we don't have all the cash in our hands right now because there are a few problems, is not a solution. Saying no is not American. We don't believe in no. We believe in yes. We'll find a way to do this, but we have to do it together. Again, I think the problem here is that we started out with a Republican governor in California whom my opponent supported, and then we had a Democratic governor whom he opposed. And so between 2007 and today, his policy shifted from supporting high-speed rail to opposing it.
All right, Congressman, is the high-speed rail a bold vision or a boondoggle in your opinion?
It's a boondoggle. Let's look at the facts. And you know, this is the perfect part of the campaign. If you support high-speed rail, vote for Terry Phillips. If you believe you want to look at how your government spends money, I'm opposed to high-speed rail, and let me state the facts. First, it came before the voters and it said it was only going to cost roughly $33 million. $9 billion for California money, right? And it's going to have private sector money added. No private sector money in. It now costs roughly, they say, about $68 billion, could cost us as high as $100 billion. It doesn't even cover San Diego. You take the numbers, they will subsidize everybody who rides that train. Just to go out and bond this money, we have a ballot on the proposition on the ballot today, Prop 30, that asking to raise taxes. Otherwise, they're going to cut the education system. If you build this train and you go to bonds, you're going to have to cut the education system. So you want to cut schools to build a train that won't finish the process. Secondly, why didn't you go back to the voters if it cost more and if you weren't going to be able to fund it all the way? Secondly, I know you're not from Bakersfield. I know you haven't lived here long. But where that cuts through in the Central Valley is the heartland that feeds the world. Where that goes through is our heritage. Puts it right by Bakersfield High School, takes part of it down. I don't think a high-speed rail should go right by a high school either. And if you think you're going to change it after the fact you voted to go through, that's not the case. Okay. If you want to raise taxes, and when they proposed it, let's be honest about it. Jim Costa put this on the ballot. We had a surplus. Today, the federal government has a $16 trillion deficit, 100% of your GDP. That's not a good investment. You wouldn't privately put that in, and you wouldn't ask your elected officials to make that bad investment. That is a wrong way to go.
Terry Phillips, you're shaking your head. Go ahead.
With all due respect, you are not here often enough to realize this, but there are meetings that go on all the time in this city, the city where you were born, where I am, as you say, a latecomer. I've only been here 8 years, but I know, and I attend the meetings to try to solve the problems of the route. The high school is a perfect example. We don't want to damage this part of the heritage, even though I know they painted over part of that WPA mural in the auditorium. But still, I think we can preserve the high school. There are alternative routes. Just saying no doesn't solve the problem. We can solve this problem with smart engineering, and there have been proposals, and if you would come to some of those meetings, you would hear them. And as far as the cost is concerned, I agree. It's costing more than was initially proposed. Tell me a government project that came in on budget. It never happens. We know as business people that every government project is going to have cost overruns. It's the nature of government. It's terrible. Government wastes money. It's the nature of government. We should fix it. We should control costs. I agree with you. But we shouldn't throw out the baby with the bathwater. That's a bad idea.
Okay, then let's just go to the facts. You've created an agency that's never built 1 mile of track and never built 1 mile of road, and you think you're going to build this. The accountability team that you put together came back and said it shouldn't be built. Not only have I been to the meetings, I brought the head of high-speed rail down and debated him at Cal State. Mr. Tackett was there. I've talked to the head of Caltrans, that's the head of the accountability, and says it's not a good idea. Secondly, you'll never get the high-speed rail that you told the voters would do because it never could get that fast through LA. So either you're going to be honest with the voters or you're not. This is the difference. We have real problems. You need real answers. I'm tired of the gimmicks. I'm tired of the ideas you're going to fix it later down the road, and I'm tired of adding to this debt.
Okay. This idea made sense to me in the beginning. You know, there was a big competition for where the railway station would be located, whether it was up by the airport or down here in downtown Bakersfield. The city won out. The high-speed rail station would be in Bakersfield. Now there's talk, State Senator Michael Rubio wants to talk about moving the rail line south of Bakersfield, the core of Bakersfield, or to the north, and putting that high-speed rail station up by the airport. What's your opinion on that?
Donald Rumsfeld said, democracy is messy. And I agree with him. This is a messy process. Things aren't neat and tidy from the outset. You have to fight over them.
Where would you like to see the station?
Well, there's been a proposal to have it very near the current Amtrak station, just south of where that station is. And I was at a meeting just last weekend where there was a discussion about redrawing the route so that we could accomplish that without interfering with the high school, without touching Mercy Hospital, without doing much harm to the corporation yard. There are ways to do this. It is foolish to say that something that would create a lot of jobs, that would mitigate our air pollution problems, which, as you know, are serious here. You've been living here longer than I have. Surely you know that. And that would, in the end, solve a transportation problem. We can't, as my opponent proposes, we can't just keep adding lanes to freeway. We not only don't have the money for that, because there's infrastructure costs too, but we can't afford the air pollution.
All right, quickly, and you don't want to see a station at all, I guess, but where would you like to see it?
I think it connects better probably to the airport. From the same plane, you could ride it, get on a train and go, you could rent a car. But first and foremost, why would you invest in something if you didn't have the money? And with the strong negotiation skills that he has, after you've already agreed to this, how are they going to have any leverage to make a decision? This is a bad idea. You don't have the finances to do, just as in your own personal home. If your income has changed, maybe you cut back on your vacation. If your income has changed, you don't go add on to the house. You cannot leverage our education system in California and subsidize every rider that's going to be on that train just because someone has a European view of California.
All right, let's get to our analysts here. Jean Tackett and Cathy Abernathy have been patiently standing by. Jean, go ahead and ask your question for Congressman McCarthy.
Congressman, we're talking about numerous problems that this nation has. They're very difficult to solve. Obviously, on this next election, the people in the United States are going to decide who's going to be the next president. If that decision is made to re-elect and that Obama comes back for a second term, would you be willing, sort of like what you did with Jerry Brown, call him at night, work out and sort of bridge this gap, but to be able to solve problems like the deficit, problems like stimulus or unemployment? Is that the kind of thing you would be willing to do? Once the voters make the decision, would that be something you would feel you could do as a leader in the House of Representatives to be able to start working in a more positive way with President Obama?
Look, I believe you have campaigns to get ideas. When elections are over, you got to govern. I can work with anyone that will work with me. I've met with this president before. I've invited him to come to understand what Kern County is like, our possibilities here for energy development, become energy independent. The most difficult thing, and it doesn't come from my side of the aisle, but from the other side of the aisle, this president doesn't reach out much. I've been to the White House. I've met with him numerous times. We even proposed during the debate of a stimulus, our own proposal, that you could take some or take others. But I think the only ability we have is that we're going to have to take our principles, but he will find common ground to be able to move forward.
And Cathy, your question for Mr. Phillips.
Well, we seem to hear whenever liberals are out of power that the Republicans should be more bipartisan. So let's say you're chairman of Ways and Means Committee. What taxes will you increase? What taxes would you delete, if any, that will get bipartisan support?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure what the reference to liberal is. I consider myself as conservative as you, ma'am. And as far as taxes are concerned, I think the problem with the way we deal with taxes in our country is that we start with the status quo. We don't look back and see where we've been, how we got to this point. We need to make smart tax cuts and smart tax increases when they're appropriate. My opponent, of course, has signed that infamous pledge where he will never, 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 never raise taxes, even if there is a net cut in spending. To me, that's not just bad policy, it's bad arithmetic. I think what we need to do is to re-examine our entire budget. I think what we need to do is audit the Fed. Congressman Ron Paul introduced legislation to audit the Fed. My opponent signed it. He was number 147. Nevertheless, he co-sponsored that bill. I would, if elected, be the first person to propose a bill to audit